There is 34 different spells that we can use in Hogwarts Legacy and over 80 spells that we know of in the Wizarding world. But what ones can we expect to be able to cast in a future DLC update that's pending for this year? Well, I've got 10 spells here for you that I think do have a lot of potential of being added into the game. And let's first start with the Patronus Charm, which we've already seen cast and demonstrated in the game via the unique Hufflepuff quest when we visited Azkaban. So we know that this spell animation and the creature model has already been created by the Avalanche team, which is a big plus in its likelihood of becoming available for us to cast that in-game, as the blueprint is already there. In fact, it's one of the most difficult and immensely complicated defensive spells in the Wizarding world that you could cast as a witch or wizard, as it requires you to channel positive emotions into a tangible positive energy force known as the Patronus or Spirit Guardian, which is why it takes that form of an animal unique to the caster. Now, it doesn't always take that animal form. There's actually two different types of Patronus. We have the corporeal, which is that animal identifiable shape of that positive energy, and we also have the incorporeal, which doesn't have a tangible shape. It doesn't have anything at all. It's just mist, essentially, but it still could prevent Dementors and Lethalfrosts from coming any closer to you. So even if the Avalanche team doesn't include a unique corporeal Patronus for us to cast in game, which I would love to see them do by linking through our Wizarding World account, just like they did for our houses and wands before the game came out. But if they decided not to do that, or if the corporeal Patronuses weren't in this game, I could definitely see this becoming a unique expansion in the summer, or Hogwarts Legacy 2 at the very least, where we learn the Misty Incorporeal spell, so we can then engage with the Dementors as kind of patrolling bosses around the world, which could offer us unique boss fights. Now, another spell that several of you have commented that you want in this game is the Piertotum Locomotor spell, which is an animation charm that brings inanimate or unmoving objects to life, with their movements being controlled by the caster. Now, Professor McGonagall famously used this charm to animate the Hogwarts suits of armors and statues around the castle to fight in the Battle of Hogwarts against Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters, which we've already kind of seen a bit of homage to at the start of Hogwarts Legacy, if you remember that cutscene or that tutorial. Now, Imelda Merker, a Slytherin student in the 1980s, also used this spell to raise an army of skeletons in Godric's Hollow's graveyard that then went on to attack Hogsmeade during the Halloween celebrations. So with all that in mind, I think there is potential here to be able to cast a spell on these suits of armors or skeletons, as there's plenty of them in this game, that we can then animate as temporary companions in combat that can do damage to enemies, or kind of become the aggro tank per se, where all of the enemies then focus on that suit of armor whilst you fire spells from range. Now, as an example of what this could look like in game, in the Dawn of Ragnarok DLC expansion, which was released a year and a half after Assassin's Creed Valhalla launched, you could actually use a spell to raise dead bodies after you killed them, who would then go on to fight for you. Now, if this spell does make it into a future update or into the next game, you could use it out of combat for fun, just like Dumbledore did, where he made the skeletons dance at Halloween in Hogwarts, which would be great fun in my opinion. Kind of like throwing a boogie bomb in Fortnite, which is a comparison that I didn't think I was ever going to make, but there we are. Now, Elijah and Sarah mentioned in the comments recently that the Obliviate memory charm would be a great inclusion in the game, and I could not agree more, as this spell, otherwise known as the Forgetfulness charm, was used to erase specific memories from an individual's mind that could also create false memories. Now, this spell has been used frequently by witches and wizards, especially on muggles, to erase any memory of significant magical events, with the British Ministry of Magic having employees who were obliviators tasked with this specific job at keeping the Wizarding world a secret. Now, San Bakar, one of the keepers in the game, also used this charm on the goblin Bragbor the Boastful to make him forget about the repositories that he had helped Isadora create for the main story. So it's already in the game in a sense, as it could be a perfect spell for us to use in and out of combat, where we could stop enemies attacking us instantaneously, or perhaps cast it on patrolling enemies or NPCs to get them to kind of walk off elsewhere there and allow us to sneak past. But these memory charms can also be broken through torture, as Lord Voldemort broke a memory charm on Bertha Jorkins. So perhaps the developers could put a temporary timer on how long this memory charm would last, or if we damage an enemy with the Obliviate debuff active on them, they would then remember what they were doing and continue to attack us. So lots of potential utility here. Now, last year, Blue Nova commented saying it would be great to have Incarcerous in the game. And again, I could not agree more with him, as Incarcerous is a spell that restrains or binds an opponent, famously used by Dolores Umbridge to strangle and subdue a centaur in the Forbidden Forest, if you remember that, and is actually already been seen in Hogwarts Legacy, where police officer Ruth Singer uses it against Cassandra Moon in the Hogsmeade quest, where we get a solid look at the ropes wrapping around her. So this would be a fantastic spell for us to use as some sort of crowd control against enemies for a limited time, giving us more time to then focus on more powerful enemies if we're in a big duel or combat fight. You could also use this against specific beasts to be able to capture them more easily in game for our room of requirement, which would be especially useful against particularly agile or dangerous magical creatures. And I will have a top 10 video about all of the beasts that we want in this game soon, so definitely worth subscribing if you're interested in that. Now, since we're talking about Officer Singer, towards the end of the scene in this Hogsmeade quest, Cassandra Moon starts giving her a little bit of lip, as we say here in the UK, where Officer Singer decides that she's heard enough and she casts the silencing charm on her. So listen to this.
No, that was Silencio.
Now, to me, it's almost as if Avalanche are kind of teasing us here, because this is another spell that has been designed in the game engine already, where the caster casts it, says it, and the person on the receiving end reacts appropriately to what was cast. The thing is, though, we can't actually use it, even though it's all there, but being able to cast the Silencing Charm would be another great utility spell for us, where we could use it against certain enemies to take them out of a fight temporarily, or even creatures like Fwoopers, who, when they sung a song, would actually drive people insane. In fact, this makes me think that this spell was intended to be there for us at launch, because we can actually catch Fwoopers in-game without the need to silence them. So I'd expect to see this in a future update for sure. And by the way, if you are enjoying the video so far, please do leave a very quick like down below. I genuinely really appreciate it, so thank you very much. Now, another spell that we've also already seen cast very briefly in the game is the banishing spell called Riddikulus that was created to successfully defeat a Bogger. We can actually see Natsai casting this spell against a Bogger in that very brief ending cutscene of the game when you've completed it in Defense Against the Dark Arts, mirroring that same scene from the books and films. Now, what's interesting about how it's teased or its inclusion here is a Bogger is a creature that is immortal, which means that it's a being that is unable to die, or arguably never has kind of been alive at all to begin with. A poltergeist being a good example of something which is also immortal, and we've already seen two of those in Hogwarts Legacy so far. Incidentally, this Bogger assumes the form of its observer's worst fear, and because of their shape-shifting ability, nobody really knows what it looks like when it's alone with itself, with the only way to defeat it through laughter, forcing them to assume some sort of amusing form, so that they would then flee the area and try to torment someone else. Now, this could be a great inclusion in a DLC update where we learn this spell ourselves, as the Boggart could take the form of different fears that we come across in the DLC storyline, that then pops out as a kind of enemy from chests, cupboards, and hidden rooms in the game when we're out exploring, and that we'll need to defeat. Now, I think this would be great because it spices up the game a little bit, because you could have people like Victor Rookwood coming back from the dead and then dueling us again in the game, just as an example. Or the Boggart could remind us where our characters' thoughts are during the main narrative, with kind of main antagonists just randomly popping up and trying to kill us as well. I think that would be quite a nice way to nudge us along this storyline. Now, in 1927, Newt Scamander used the tracking spell Appare Vestigium to help him investigate and locate the whereabouts of Tina Codstein in the streets of Paris. It ended up working, of course, as this charm reveals the illuminated traces of recent magical activity and shows magical footprints, handprints, and track marks in certain areas. Now, not only would this be a great investigation spell for us in-game, where we would follow a trail on a quest line, reliving what's happened in the past in certain areas that we visit. A good example of this kind of mechanic being Batman in the Arkham series when he's doing his detective work, or most recently actually Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. But perhaps this could be a passive spell like Alohomora, so it doesn't need to be slotted into our spell diamonds, and kind of opens up a new type of gameplay for us to explore, solving magical crimes in the past, or even hunting for very rare magical creatures throughout the world. And perhaps whilst we are tracking our enemies or dangerous beasts here, we may want to use the Nebulus fogging spell. That is a charm that conjures fog from the tip of our wands. Albus Dumbledore using this to conjure fog in London whilst waiting for Newt to meet him at St. Paul's Cathedral. So a lot of potential to use this spell like a instant smoke bomb in game and disappear from enemies, just like in Assassin's Creed. Now, combat is one of the biggest highlights for me in this game, but there is one thing that it's missing, and that's the introduction of healing charms such as Brackium Emendo, which was an incantation that could be used to heal broken bones and not vanish them, which Gilderoy Lockhart famously did in 1992 when trying to repair Harry's arm.
Brackium Emendo!
Now, using this spell in-game, or perhaps using the Ferula spell, which is the bandaging charm, which could be an alternative to using the Wiggenweld potion in-game. And even though these spells may not be as effective as the potions, it would give us a little extra insurance or reprieve in combat when we're close to death and we haven't come prepared. I've also spoken about co-op mode recently in other videos, but I do think that Hogwarts Legacy will implement some sort of co-op multiplayer mode in the future, as Warner Bros. CEO said that he wants to focus on live service updates for WB's games going forward. So I think that the introduction of healing spells that we players can use on our friends when we're out questing together may be a great move or a great spell for cooperative gameplay. Now, when I was recently editing a few Hogwarts Legacy videos for you, I came across this bit of footage from the behind-the-scenes developer diaries at Avalanche Software, where a NPC had this dancing feet animation, and I initially thought it was a bug that they were fixing, right? But Nika actually told me it was a random encounter in Hogsmeade where a wizard has dancing socks. And that kind of got me thinking about the Tarantallegra curse, which was a charm that made the target's legs and feet spasm wildly out of control, making it appear that they were dancing. Draco famously used this spell against Harry in the first Dueling Club session, with Albus Dumbledore also using it on the suits of armor to get them to dance around the castle. So this is another one of those spells that could allow us some environmental fun around the game, but also have some sort of combat utility where it could immobilize an enemy for a certain amount of time. And you could say the same about Rictus Sempra, which is not to be confused with the Sectum Sempra spell invented by Snape, where the Rictus Sempra spell was called the Tickling Charm that caused the target to buckle or hit the ground with laughter, weakening them in the process, with Harry using this against Aragog the Spider in the books, which ended up working just as well as a stunning charm. So I think both of these would be enjoyable to have in the game as well, as I can imagine an NPC rolling around on the floor laughing as kind of good fun for us as players. Now, we have Dragonfire and Fire Tornadoes in this game, but as Elijah, Young Money, and Revan have all said in the comments, which I agree with again, by the way, is that why can't we summon, or when will we be able to summon, Fiendfyre, which you may have seen before, as this is the spell that Crab used in the Room of Requirement, where these enchanted flames were actually really capable of destroying nearly anything and everything it came in contact with. It was a notorious deadly curse in the wizarding world, not just because of the damage that it does, but it often took the form of gigantic, fiery, magical beast that specifically searches for living beings to consume. And as you'd expect, it requires extreme skill and intense concentration just to control these beastie flames, as they can really get out of hand very quickly if you're not a competent witch or wizard. Now, I'd love to see this in Hogwarts Legacy, even if it's just conjuring some sort of fire serpent that attacks enemies and then dissipates quickly, kind of like Hanzo's Spirit Dragon in Overwatch, if you've played that game. But as they included 3 unforgivable curses in Hogwarts Legacy, I think having an ultimate move in future updates is important to keep it challenging, fresh, and good fun. You could even include the Protego Diabolica spell instead of the Fiendfyre here, which allows you to create a protective ring of black or blue fire around yourself that then incinerates enemies who then, of course, come in contact with it. And we already have a Ring of Fire animation in the game already with an upgraded Incendio at the moment, so I could definitely see this happening for sure, as it's just increasing that spell in size and keeping it active for longer. Now, On top of all that, I've got even more Hogwarts Legacy content for you, which I think you'll find interesting and fun, especially if you found this video enjoyable. So click the video on your screen or on my face right now, and I'll see you there in just a second. Big thanks to Nika for helping me make this video and helping me gather all of the footage. As usual, Butterbeer is on her, and hopefully I'll see you in that next Hogwarts Legacy video in just a second.